In Kuei village, life followed the rhythm of a peaceful river. The boys grew up to become farmers, fishermen, or carpenters, just like their fathers. Girls, after high school, married young and started their own families, taking care of the home and children. Kuei residents did not know about the university. This was like a distant dream, something they had never heard of. For them, education ended at high school, and that was enough. Parents were happy as long as their children knew how to read and write. They didn't ask for more because they weren't aware of other possibilities. Life in the village was stable, like the sunrise and sunset every day. It had been like this for years, but something was about to change, something that would shake Kuei's peaceful life. A change was in the air, like a storm about to break. The village didn't know it yet, but life would never be the same again. On a sunny day, Kuei was filled with excitement as he welcomed a group of students from the city who came on a field trip. They arrived with big smiles, stylish clothes, and shiny shoes. The villagers had never seen anything like this. The students walked upright, holding their books to one side and chatting about life in the city. His words sounded like music to the ears of the residents. "Look at how they walk," whispered the villagers. "Look how they talk." The students showed many strange and interesting things. They talked about the big machines used in the city, machines that could build houses and facilitate agriculture. They showed the villagers how they studied with the help of these machines. Everyone's eyes were wide with admiration. The chief, standing with his staff, could hardly believe it. He looked at the students and thought to himself, "This is what our children should be like." The whole village thought the same thing. For the first time, the idea of sending their own children to the city for university crossed their minds. The city students only stayed for a short time, but they left something behind: hope. The villagers now dreamed of a future where their children would go beyond the village, beyond high school, in search of something greater. They wanted their children to wear elegant clothes, walk with confidence, and become wise, just like those students in the city. Villagers gathered under the big Io tree to discuss this new dream. The men scratched their chins, the women whispered among themselves, and the children listened attentively, with wide eyes. Everyone agreed that a child should go to the city and learn about the world, but who would it be? They looked around, thinking hard, and then someone said, "Faye." The others nodded, as they all knew that Faye was no ordinary girl. Her beauty was like the sun shining after the rain, radiant and pure. She was also intelligent, with attentive eyes that noticed everything, kind, always helping her mother, always laughing, always making her elders smile. "Yes, Faye," they said, their voices becoming firmer. "She will be the one to make Kuei proud." So the villagers gathered gifts for the Faye's journey. The women prepared food, dried yams, ground pepper, and some palm oil. The men gathered what little money they had, every penny they could save, and like a river of love, they blessed her with blessings. The elders placed their hands on his head, whispering words of strength and protection, filling his heart with courage. "Go, Faye. Remember us. Make us proud." With her heart full of the hopes and dreams of the entire village, Faye departed Kuei, her small bag clutched tightly, her mind buzzing with thoughts of the city. As she walked, the villagers watched, waving and wiping tears from their eyes, sending her off with all their dreams on their small shoulders. When Faye arrived in the city, it seemed like she had entered a completely new world. Buildings stood tall like giant trees, cars sped by like birds, and the streets were filled with people, each with their own path and purpose. Faye's eyes were wide with wonder, and her heart was beating with a mix of excitement and fear. School was a strange place at first, but Faye learned quickly. He studied with dedication, always raising his hand, always listening attentively. Soon, his teachers noticed his brilliant mind and his classmates saw his kind smile. She was not just a girl from a distant village, she became everyone's friend. Faye met a girl named Toshi, who became her best friend. Toshi knew every corner of the city and showed Faye how to get around. She taught which paths to follow, which foods to try, and even how to avoid the dangers of the city. With Toshi by her side, Faye felt a little more at ease, but life in the city wasn't easy. The money the Faye village sent was little, just enough to buy a few things. Some days, she would go to bed with her stomach growling, her mind wandering back to Kuei, where her family and village had given everything to support her. "I can't fail them," she whispered to herself every night, holding on to the small hope they had placed in her heart. And so Faye continued, balancing the challenges of the city with the dreams of her village, her spirit as strong as a young tree, swaying but unshakable. At first, Faye thought her new school was full of friendly faces, like her friend Toshi's, but she soon discovered that not everyone was smiling. Some students, especially those with polished shoes and elegant clothes, began to notice that Faye dressed differently. She wore simple clothes, every stitch reminding her of her village, her family, her people. For her, they were clothes of pride, but for them, they were strange and out of place. They began to whisper as she passed, their voices sharp as thorns. "Look at her," they murmured. "She's just a village girl." Some girls were laughing behind her, covering their mouths with their manicured hands. "Doesn't she know how to dress for the city?" Each word hurt like a bee sting, small but piercing. Faye tried to keep her head up, ignoring the laughter and hurtful words. She walked quickly, hoping the day would end soon, hoping tomorrow would be better. But each day, the whispers grew louder and the laughter turned to teasing. They began to call her village girl, as if it were her only name, each word echoing in her mind. Some boys also teased her, pushing each other and smoking while they saw her in her simple clothes. "Go back to where you came from," they mocked. "You don't belong here." Faye's heart felt heavy and loneliness enveloped her like a shadow that wouldn't leave her. But Faye was no stranger to hardship. She was clutching her face, remembering the village that trusted her, the people who sent her with nothing but hope. Still, the burden grew heavier every day and Faye began to wonder if the city would break her spirit. The light that once shone in her eyes was fading, as if the shadows of the city were swallowing her whole. As time passed, Faye couldn't help but notice something strange about her friend Toshi. Although Toshi's family didn't have much, she always seemed to have money, new shoes, snacks, and the latest dresses. For someone who counted every kobo and struggled to buy the smallest things, this was strange. Faye found herself wondering. One afternoon, she looked at Toshi, her curiosity finally overflowing. "Toshi, how do you manage to buy all these things? Where does the money come from?" Toshi just laughed, waving the question away. "Ah, Faye, don't worry about that," she said, smiling. "Just a little work here and there." But Faye's mind would not rest. She watched Toshi disappear into the night, dressed more carefully, his eyes shining and secretive. Each time, the Faye's curiosity grew, sharp as a knife blade. She tried to ask again, but Toshi just laughed, changing the subject. "One day you'll understand, Faye. Don't worry about how I make my money." But Faye couldn't ignore the thought that lingered in the back of her mind. There was a shadow, a hint of something unknown, and it began to grow, spreading like a dark cloud. What was Toshi hiding, and how could she live so comfortably while Faye fought alone? In the silent moments, Faye tried to understand everything. The questions followed her like an echo, a half-whispered secret that hung in the air. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something she couldn't yet see, something hidden in the heart of the city. Time passed like sand between the Faye's fingers, and her small supply of money was soon exhausted. The town's demands were never-ending, and each day the Faye's hunger grew, a sharp reminder that what little the village sent was never enough. His stomach growled like a restless animal, the pain increasing as his hope began to fade. She sat alone in her small room at night, a simple candle illuminating her letters to Mama Papa. He wrote with shaking hands, "Things are difficult here. I don't want to be a burden, but it's so different in the city." He sent the letters in hopes that his words would bring a little more help, but Kue was a poor village. They sent what they could, small packages of dried fish or some coins. Her mother's letters were full of love and concern, but Faye knew her family was trying their best to support her. The days turned into long, hungry weeks. She could barely concentrate in class, her mind drifting like smoke, too weak to keep her thoughts steady. His stomach growled during class, each sound loud like thunder. But she tried to sit still, ignoring her classmates' laughter, because she knew she couldn't let the village down. But his spirit was slowly breaking, piece by piece. The nights grew colder, the city grew darker, and the weight of its difficulties pressed upon it like an invisible stone, heavy and unforgiving. In the midst of all this, Toshi's laughter echoed in her mind, the friend with easy money, a hidden secret and no worries. The Faye's heart twisted, torn between pride and the bitter taste of powerlessness. One night, exhausted on her thin mattress, her stomach empty and aching, Faye reached a breaking point. She could no longer ignore the hunger that consumed her, a constant reminder of how difficult life in the city had become. The next morning, with tired eyes and a heavy heart with shame, she found Toshi outside the school. "Toshi, please," he whispered, his voice shaking. "I need to know. Let me work with you, whatever it is. I can't keep living like this." Toshi looked at her friend with a serious look, her smile fading as she realized how desperate Faye had become. "Faye, Are you sure this isn't like other jobs? It's different, she asked slowly. But the Fae's eyes were resolute, her need too great to give up now. I don't care, she said firmly, her voice steadier than she felt. Just show me. I have no choice. After a long silent pause, Toshi finally nodded. She led Fae to a quiet corner where the city lights cast soft shadows. Listen, Fae, this isn't something you share with just anyone. It's a way to make a quick buck, but it's not what you think. In low tones, Toshi revealed the truth. Fae's heart skipped a beat, her pulse quickening as she understood what her friend was saying. This was not the kind of work she had imagined. It was something strange, dangerous, something the villagers never approved of. But Fae, worn down by hunger and hardship, nodded without saying a word. I'll do it, he whispered, his voice quiet but determined. For the first time in months, he felt a lightness, albeit one obscured by a growing darkness in his heart. Her path was changing and she could feel it, but there was no going back now. That night, Toshi brought Fae a dress that sparkled like the stars, making her look almost like a part of the city itself. Toshi painted her face with colors that Fae had never used before, and when she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. You look perfect, Toshi said with a wave, his smile comforting but distant. Fae followed her friend to a bar where the lights were bright and the music was pounding like a beating heart. The air was filled with laughter and conversation, strangers moving from table to table. Toshi guided Fae through everything, teaching her how to talk, how to laugh, how to charm. Nervous but determined, Fae followed every step, every whisper of Toshi's guiding words. As the night progressed, Fae found herself sitting with a man who handed her money, more than she had ever held in her life. She had fun with the man earlier, satisfying him in the bedroom. The coin fell into her palm like an otherworldly gift, the weight of them filling her with a strange, new sensation. She had come here with hunger in her heart, but now she felt something more, something close to excitement. When he left the bar that night, his pockets full, the city lights seemed brighter, his worries more distant. He spent freely, buying food and treats that he only dreamed of trying. For a moment, he forgot everything, his village, his promises. The hope he carried was replaced by the excitement of his new life, a taste of freedom that seemed as sweet as honey. Fae had entered a dazzling and dangerous world, a world that made her feel alive. She didn't know it at the time, but with every step she took, she left behind Kuei, the village that had sent her with so much hope. Early one morning, Fae returned from the luxurious home of a rich man with whom she had spent the night. His body felt heavy, a deep pain settled into his bones and his skin burned. She dismissed it as a mild illness, just tiredness from late nights, she thought, maybe a little fever. She lay down on the bed hoping that rest would ease the strange weakness that followed her like a shadow. But when Fae woke up, the weakness was still there. Days passed and she grew more tired with each one, her body seemed to slip out of her control. His friends noticed too, and their laughter turned to concern. They brought food, medicine, everything they thought would help, but their strength continued to disappear like water running through their fingers. Then something even stranger started to happen. Her belly started to swell. At first, she thought it was just a trick of the eye, but her belly became rounder every day, hardening like a clay pot. His arms and legs, however, became thin and fragile like branches. The other girls whispered, their faces pale with fear. It's like Goko, one of them murmured, shaking her head. But how? She ate more now than ever, but Fae herself was scared. He touched his swollen belly, pressing gently as if trying to understand this strange change. He felt his bones poking through his skin elsewhere, his cheeks sinking in, his eyes growing wide and distant, and yet his belly continued to grow, as if it hid something much darker than hunger. Her friends did everything they could. They brought herbs, spices and medicines that they heard could cure almost anything. They watched her, hoping that each morning she could sit down with a smile. Their strength returned, but no matter what they tried, Fae continued to weaken. Her skin lost its shine, her hair became damaged, and her once bright eyes now looked tired, heavy with a shadow that no amount of rest could lift. Days turned into weeks, and soon her friends had exhausted all the medicine they knew. The town's doctors shook their heads, saying there was nothing they could do. And slowly, even her friends began to move away, frightened by what they didn't understand. Fae was alone, feeling her life slipping further and further away, like a river flowing beyond her reach. Desperate and terrified, they made a decision. They had to take her back to the village. They whispered to each other, nodding with determination. They would return to Kuei, the village that once filled their hearts with strength and hope. It was the only place that could save her, the only place where a solution could be found. And so, with heavy hearts, they lifted the Fae's frail, shrunken body, covering her with a blanket and setting out for Kuei, hoping that her people would understand. Fae's friends arrived at Kuei on a cold, cloudy morning, carrying her with the delicacy of a fragile doll. The villagers, who had been eagerly awaiting his return, gathered around, their faces full of expectation. For months they had dreamed of this day, imagining Fae returning as a great symbol of the village's pride, a young woman transformed by the city, perhaps even wearing clothes that glowed like the city lights. But what they saw left them silent, their hopes falling like stones. Fae were barely recognizable. His once handsome face was pale and empty, his body frail and thin, as if he hadn't eaten in weeks. His belly was swollen and rounded, a macabre distortion of health, and his eyes had a distant, dull look, as if they were lost in an invisible storm. The vibrant young woman who had left with the village's hopes now seemed like a ghost returned from some dark place. Fae's friends, avoiding the prying eyes of the villagers, quickly explained that Fae had fallen ill, that life in the city had taken its toll, and that they didn't know what else to do other than bring her back. They offered no further details, not even about the life they had introduced her to. Each word was heavy and cutting, and without further explanation, they turned and hurriedly departed back to the world they knew, leaving Kuei and the Fae's fate behind. The villagers watched in shock and sadness, murmuring among themselves, confusion and sadness mixing in their voices. "This isn't an accident," someone whispered, barely able to believe their eyes. The Fae's parents came forward, trembling, and knelt beside her frail figure. Tears filled her eyes. They had sent a strong young woman, with dreams as vast as the sky, and now before them stood the shadow of that same child, broken, weak, and silent. The village gathered around her in silence, each person dealing with their disbelief and sadness. Fae lay on a braided rug in the village square, surrounded by familiar faces, each heavy with worry. Her fragile body trembled as she looked around, seeing the warmth and sadness in the eyes of the people who sent her to the city with so much hope. With trembling lips she spoke, her voice barely a whisper but carrying the weight of 1,000 regrets. "City life is hard," she continued, eyes fixed on the ground. "The money you sent was never enough. I tried to manage, but hunger became my constant shadow." Her voice broke as she continued, each word cutting through her like a knife. "I met a friend, Toshi, who showed me a way to survive, but it was a path I never should have taken. I forgot my purpose, I forgot you, who believed in me. I chose the wrong path." As his confession hung in the air, the villagers listened, their faces a mixture of sadness and understanding. Tears ran down her cheeks, each one shining like fallen hopes. "I have dishonored you all," he whispered, "bringing shame to my family, to our village." The ancient elder Enna stepped forward, her eyes stern but soft with the wisdom of years. He placed a gentle hand on the Fae's head, his voice deep and firm. "What you suffer now is not just an illness, Fae. This is not a simple illness. You are pregnant, conceived out of wedlock. This is the curse of tradition of our village, a punishment for breaking the sacred bond." The villagers murmured softly, nodding in understanding. The Fae's swollen belly, her weakened body, it was all part of the ancient consequence, known to every girl and boy raised in Kuei. The tradition was clear: if a young woman became pregnant out of wedlock, her body would suffer, her spirit would weaken as a reminder of the village's honor and values. But Elder Enna continued, her voice steady and calm, "There is a cure, Fae. The village has seen so much sadness before and we know the ways of healing. The path back to health will not be easy, but if you are willing, you can put it back together again." Fae looked at the elders, her eyes full of hope and shame. She nodded, grateful for the chance to redeem herself. With understanding in their eyes, the villagers gathered around her, their hearts softened with compassion, ready to help her find her way back. The village herbalists approached the Fae, whispering prayers as they prepared herbs and potions. His hands moved gently, with the care one would give to a delicate flower. Each day, they applied roots and leaves soaked in special oils, massaging her swollen belly and whispering healing words to guide her spirit back to strength. Fae lay still, trusting them, feeling the warmth return to their bones like sunlight after a long storm. Slowly, Fae's strength returned. His fragile body began to strengthen, his eyes regained the shine they once had. She began to take care of herself, eating the nutritious meals her mother prepared and listening to the elder women's advice on how to care for the life growing inside her. They taught her to caress her belly with love and respect, to speak softly to her unborn child, to make peace with the path that had brought her home. Months passed, and the day finally arrived under a moonlit night. Faye gave birth to a boy, his cries filling the air like a song of new beginnings. The villagers gathered, offering blessings and prayers for the child's future. Faye held him close, her small face a reminder of everything she had endured and the promise of everything she would become. She named him Aod, which means joy has returned home. He was not only her son, but also her redemption. As the seasons changed, Faye grew determined to finish what she had once started. With her son in her arms, she vowed to return to school, this time with a renewed spirit and a heart full of purpose. Her days were long, balancing studies with motherhood, but she didn't waver. She worked tirelessly, each small victory a step towards the life her village had dreamed of for her. Years passed and Faye's hard work bore fruit. She became a respected woman, known not only for her intelligence but also for her strength and resilience. When she finally returned to Kuei, not as a lost soul but as a woman who had overcome her trials, the village celebrated. They honored her courage and the strength she showed in the face of hardship, seeing her not as a girl who had gone astray, but as a woman who had learned and grown. The Faye's story has become a tale passed down from generation to generation, a reminder of the importance of courage, resilience, and second chances. The village, once silent and simple, now carried its history like a precious jewel, a lesson for all the young women who would one day follow their own paths. As the years passed, the people of Kuei spoke her name with pride, for Faye had become the symbol of their hopes and dreams, a beacon of the strength that lives in every heart. As the seasons changed, Faye and her son Aod became the beating heart of Kuei. The village, once silent and simple, now vibrated with stories of overcoming and hope. Have you ever wondered how a single person can transform an entire community? Faye was living proof of that. Not only did she regain her strength, but she also inspired others to pursue their own paths of resilience. Faye decided it was time to give back to the village that welcomed her back. With Aod in her arms, she began attending the local school, teaching the children about the wonders of the city and the importance of education. How can we expand our horizons without leaving where we are? She often asked during classes, encouraging young people to dream beyond the borders of Kuei. But Faye's journey was far from over. She knew that to truly change the village, she needed to go beyond basic education. And it was then that an audacious idea emerged, building a small community library. Can we gather the necessary resources? She asked herself, as she shared her vision with the elders and residents. The response was a mix of enthusiasm and skepticism. Many remembered the hardships the Faye faced in the city and feared that another attempt would bring more suffering. Despite her doubts, Faye persisted. With the support of Elder Enna and other respected village figures, she began organizing community meetings to raise funds and materials. How can we individually contribute to the greater good? She asked, encouraging each person to find their own way to help. The response was surprising. Farmers, fishermen, artisans, and even the youngest of girls began to collaborate, bringing donated books, building materials, and even time to help build the library. Have you ever reflected on the power of community unity? With each passing day, the library took shape, symbolizing not only knowledge but also Kuei's collective strength. Faye saw herself transforming, not just as a survivor, but as a visionary leader. What more can we do to ensure our future generations have the tools they need to thrive? She pondered, always looking for ways to improve village life. However, not everything was easy. The construction of the library brought old conflicts and disagreements to the surface. Some residents believed that the resources should be used for other immediate needs, such as improving agricultural techniques or building new homes. Are we prioritizing the future over the present? Asked Faye during meetings. These discussions, although challenging, strengthened the community, teaching them the importance of dialogue and compromise. As the library finally opened, a sense of pride and accomplishment hovered over Kuei. Children ran inside, curious to explore the books and learn about the world beyond the village. What impact will this have on their lives? Faye asked herself, observing the bright eyes of the little readers. The answer was clear: the library was not just a building, but a door to infinite possibilities. As time passed, Faye realized that her mission was just beginning. She began developing educational programs, inviting former students who had returned from the city to share their experiences and knowledge. How can we continue to evolve without forgetting our roots? She asked, always seeking to balance progress with the preservation of Kuei traditions. Aod, now a curious and energetic boy, watched his mother with admiration. "What are you planning for the village, mother?" he asked often, inspiring Faye to continue innovating. Together, mother and son became a dynamic duo, leading projects that promoted both economic development and cultural appreciation. Have you ever thought about how small actions can trigger big changes? Fei firmly believed that every gesture of kindness and every collective effort could transform Kuei into an example of resilience and progress. And so, with determination and love, she continued to weave the bright future of her village, reminding everyone that, even in the face of the greatest adversity, hope and unity will always prevail. Over the years, Kuei's library became the beating heart of the village. Children and adults found a refuge there to learn, dream, and share knowledge. Fei watched with pride as Aode grew, accompanying her every step of her educational journey. Have you ever thought about how education can transform not just one person, but an entire community? She often mused, inspiring villagers to value learning even more. Fei's dedication did not go unnoticed. Soon, other members of the village began to be inspired by his example, looking for ways to contribute to Kuei's development. How can we expand our knowledge beyond books? She asked during community meetings, encouraging everyone to actively participate. This quest for knowledge and continuous improvement has created an atmosphere of hope and innovation in the village. But like every story of transformation, challenges began to emerge. With increased access to education, new expectations and pressures also emerged. Are we prepared to deal with these new demands? Fei wondered as she observed the changes around her. Some villagers, fearful of the changes, resisted the new developments, preferring to keep traditions unchanged. This internal tension led Fei to reflect on how to balance progress with preserving Kuei's cultural roots. It was then that a unique opportunity arose. A group of former students who had studied in the city decided to return to share their experiences and knowledge. How can we apply what we've learned to benefit our village? Fei asked during the inaugural meeting. These alumni have brought new ideas and perspectives, from advanced agricultural techniques to sustainable construction methods, further enriching Kuei's repertoire. Have you ever wondered how different perspectives can enrich a community? The arrival of these alumni not only brought innovation, but also strengthened ties between residents, promoting an exchange of ideas that propelled Kuei to a new level of development. With the support of Fei and alumni, the village began implementing improvement projects. New farming techniques have increased agricultural productivity, reducing hunger and providing a more stable life for all. How can we ensure that these advances benefit everyone equally? Fei pondered, always careful that no member of the community was left behind. The inclusion and active participation of everyone have become fundamental pillars for the success of these ventures. Meanwhile, Aode, now a determined young man, watched his mother with admiration and a desire to follow in her footsteps. "Mom, how can I help continue this legacy of transformation?" he asked, eager to contribute to the village he loved so much. Fei saw in him the continuation of her own journey, a symbol of hope and renewal for future generations. However, not everything was perfect. With growth and modernization, questions about cultural identity and the maintenance of ancestral traditions also arose. How can we maintain our identity while embracing progress? Fei wondered during community discussions. This reflection led the village to value its roots even more, integrating new practices with the traditions that define them. The celebration of diversity of ideas and the constant search for balance have made Kuei an example of resilience and adaptation. What more can we do to ensure that our village continues to prosper without losing its essence? Fei encouraged, promoting debates and workshops that harmoniously united past and future. Over time, the library expanded, becoming a multifunctional center that housed not only books, but also craft workshops, talks on sustainability and spaces for community discussions. How can we transform this space into a true hub of innovation and culture? Fei asked, always looking for new ways to enrich life in the village. Aode, inspired by his mother's example, took an active role in the community, leading projects that aim to further improve the quality of life in Kuei. How can we involve more young people in these initiatives? He asked, recognizing the importance of including new generations in the transformation process. This synergy between Fei, Aode, and the other residents created a virtuous cycle of development and renewal. Could our village become a model for other communities? Fei pondered, noting the positive impact of the changes implemented. The answer lay in collective determination and everyone's desire to build a better future. But, as with every journey, unexpected obstacles arose. Weather challenges threatened the village's harvests and economic stability. How can we overcome these adversities without losing our cohesion? Fei asked herself, looking for solutions that would unite everyone for the common good. Resilience and unity proved to be essential to face these moments of crisis, further strengthening community ties. Have you ever reflected on how unity and determination can help overcome the biggest challenges? The answer was clear to the Fae and the residents of Kuei. Together, they were stronger and capable of weathering any storm that might arise. With each challenge overcome, the village's confidence and pride grew. How far can we get if we continue like this? Faye asked herself, envisioning a future full of possibilities. The village of Kuei, once quiet and limited, was transforming into a true example of innovation, resilience and harmony between tradition and progress. And so the story of Faye and Kuei continued to unfold, inspiring future generations to believe in the power of education, unity, and determination. What will be the next step in this journey of transformation? You may ask, eager to discover the next adventures and achievements of this extraordinary village. I hope you liked the story. If so, please enjoy the video, comment on what you learned from this narrative, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting tales like this. Thanks.